I'm Duncan Spence, and this is the JSource International Reporting Bureau's weekly wrap-up, where we take a look at some of the larger international stories that Canadian media has been covering this week. Monday opened quietly on the international front, with a focus on the aftermath of the Bardo Museum shooting in Tunisia. The story ran in the National Post, the Star, and the Globe. It was sourced from wire services by the Post and the Globe, and the New York Times by the Star. On Tuesday, news broke that a Germanwings Airbus A320 airliner en route to Germany had crashed in the Alps. Wednesday morning, coverage was dominated by the aftermath of the tragedy. The Globe and Mail devoted its two-page folio to the crash. The spread contained a two-page report from Paul Coring, accompanied by Reuters, AFP, and AP photographs of the crash site and families of the victims. It also featured analysis infographics of the plane's route, altitude, and speed previous to the crash. The National Post ran its own one-page feature under the headline, "Tragedy in the Alps, Wreck Leaves No Hope for Survivors." The report came from Gordon Rayner and also featured infographics of the plane's route and altitude, along with another technical infographic giving specifications of the Airbus A320. The Star ran its report on page 2. The report from Associated Press writers Angela Sarleton and Greg Geller featured an aerial photo of the crash site. The CBC followed the story from southern France with a report from Nal-Ayed. Thursday, all three papers continued their coverage of the story, teasing it on their front pages. The Star continued its coverage, reprinting a report from the New York Times from writers Nicola Clark and Dan Bilevsky, based in Paris. It ran under the headline, "Co-pilot left cockpit but couldn't get back in." The National Post followed suit, reprinting the same report from Clark and Bilevsky. Running alongside the piece was a photo of the flight recorder and short paragraphs about victims. The Globe and Mail also ran the same report, but with a photo of the French, Spanish, and German leaders standing together near the crash site. Coverage on Friday again centered on the Germanwings 9535 crash, as the announcement came that the co-pilot had crashed the flight on purpose. CBC's The National followed the announcement with reports from Nal-Ayed in France, Adrian Arsenault in Toronto, as well as a report on cockpit protocol from Susan Ormiston. CTV's Danielle Hamamjian followed the story from Germany, focusing on the events leading up to the crash and the co-pilot's possible motivations. The Star ran a full-page report from staff reporter Ravina Alak that explored reasons the co-pilot may have been driven to crash his own plane. The Globe shifted its angle with a report from Paul Coring on changes to cockpit access rules, while the Post ran a story from Patrick Sawyer in Germany on the pilot's psychological history. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday also featured secondary coverage from each outlet. The Star continued its focus on the Canadian mission in Iraq and its prospective expansion with its own one-piece section. The focus throughout the week remained on Harper's efforts to expand Canada's role in the fight against ISIS. The Globe and Mail's secondary focus came from Jeffrey York in Africa, as he continued to follow Boko Haram's actions in Nigeria. The National Post touched on both issues in the latter half of the week, pulling their coverage from wire sources. I'm Duncan Spence, and this has been the JSource International Reporting Bureau's weekly wrap-up. For more, visit us on jsource.ca or follow us on Twitter.